I will have to. I'll have to clock out right at what time do you have to clock out? 10:30.
10:30. Yeah.
Yeah. See, let's see if we can keep it tight. Let's do 10:25.
Okay.
Just we got an oil change happening this morning that I didn't know about. So
Okay.
and it's raining. So and it ain't my car. So um, yeah, I'm chauffeur support for that, which is
Gotcha.
cool. So we'll
That's
make it
good.
work.
There's a lot of I like all the moving pieces there. Hey,
Yeah,
Roland,
yeah,
this time, oil change, chauffeur. Yeah, I get all that. It's actually
Mhm.
kind of a miracle that I found this hour that we
The
can talk
pocket.
today.
We found
Um,
the pocket.
I found the pocket, and I have to tell you, when I was mentally going through today,
Hmm.
I tell you, I've got no I have very little capacity left in me. So I'm looking at the day. I'm like, I'm literally going to be out all day, and I have no interest in it today. Um, and it's hard for me to say to other people I'm not doing it because they kind of depend on me or my wife to do it. And at this moment, it's me. It's not her. So
Hmm.
I have no interest, but here we are. So I'm glad we could find this pocket. It's almost like I know you know that I like to talk about the universe speaking to me. The universe was like, well, you've got this hour. If Chris is available, you might want to jump in and do this because it does feed me in a positive way. And we haven't been able to do it because of our
Hmm.
schedule, mostly my schedule, I would say. But here we are. Anyway, this is season 7, episode 20, number 285 of the Decoded podcast. We usually don't start by just chatting. Usually I do my little this is, and then we go. So I like the little bit of a mix up. I like that.
Hmm.
Um, I can't even remember if it's been have is this did we miss 2 weeks in a row, 3 weeks?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gary, good morning. Gary's with us. He's
It's
dropped the
nice to see
GM.
our evergreen listeners sticking with us,
Yeah,
sticking by our side.
we appreciate it, Gary. And I know Rochelle liked my tweet, my ex, my ex, my tweet. I don't know
Hmm.
what to call it. My post. So maybe she's here too. I don't know, but if she is, great. Good morning, welcome. If she's not, good morning. We'll see you
We
next
get
time.
it. We
Yeah, we
totally get
totally
it.
get it.
As if we could put any demands on our listeners. Good morning, Gary. Any demands on our listeners, considering, we kind of roll with impunity.
Well, I
We
mean,
don't. It's not that. Gary, here's a nugget of wisdom that I think I won't speak on behalf of you, Chids, but I think we've shared this moment. Again, this reflective practice thing, it's got to work with your life. Like this idea of you know what? You want enforced reflective practice? Go to a staff meeting and they'll tell you, take the next 5 minutes to consider the implications of, or what do you notice in this slide? Or turn to an elbow partner. That's enforced reflective practice, right? And it never feels great. I will tell you, every time that you and I are able to make this work, it feels good. I there's no compliance here. It's just a willingness to kind of share the mic, share the space, and let's just play with what pops up. So
I get you. That word hits me hard today. Enforced. when
I
you
know.
when you're told to do something. Rochelle's here. Bon
Never
matin,
sure. Bon
bonjour,
matin.
bon matin, bonjour. Merci pour arriver ici. I know the grammar is horrible, but thanks for being here. um, it's good to see you. Oh, and look at this. Karen's in the house. Karen,
Hey, good morning,
welcome.
Karen.
Coffee in hand, ready to learn. Welcome to March break. Yes,
Cheers.
welcome to March break.
Friends, happy after International Women's Day. We'll just let's
Mm,
drop into that. Yep, let's
yes.
drop into that.
So I did see lots of posts on social about
Mhm.
that. What I did was I saw one that I saw a post. It may have been Instagram. I particularly liked it, and it spoke to me in my relationship with my wife. So I sent it to
Mhm.
her, gave her a thumbs up. Yeah, big time to all women. It sucks that we have to have like an International Women's Day in terms of like recognizing the other half of the world kind of thing. Like it's anyway. I'm just saying it's whack to me. We should be appreciating everybody every day. Anyway, it's nice. I'm all for it.
My
Thank you for
students
bringing
had
it up.
Yeah, yeah, my students had an interesting so just part of our morning meeting, I've we go through all these kind of things and I prime them and I just call it stuff you should know. And they don't like it, but I not that they don't like International Women's Day. They don't like that I'm constantly bringing the world into the classroom. They're not too hip with it, right? Sometimes have a little hard time understanding or seeing the relevance. Um, so the they had some interesting questions though because we've done quite a few of these. I mean, if you pay attention to any calendar, there's many celebration and commemoration days. So they've gotten used to a few of them in the class now. I've gotten used to like, okay, International Women's Day, is this a celebration or commemoration? I'm like, that's a great question. That's a great question. It comes to mind right now just because my lead saying happy after International Women's Day, and that's I just loaded up with my own power and assumed that, happiness comes along for the ride with that. And it might not. It might not. I mean, any of the stories, and we dug into a few of them yesterday, um, don't all, have happiness a part of it, but there's definitely um, information, experience, and moments in history that need to be renoticed. Renoticed. And we found ourselves at the end. I introduced my kids to the idea of unlearning. It didn't go so well. It didn't go so well. I think I got to come back to that idea again. And I'm not quite sure where I stand on this concept of unlearning. Like somehow you can, I don't know. It's a rough copy. It's a rough copy. But in that sandbox, the kids starting with commemoration or celebration, and then this idea because the thing showed them a short video and it was loaded with stats as far as pay equity and access to medical care and when the vote, like all these sort of like kind of things that show representation and inclusion and access growing. Um, there was still, a kid that says like, but this is not my problem. Like in short, this is not my problem. This is like other people's work. So I got work to do in the class just to kind of make sure that um, these moments in time, because like I said, every couple days, probably every day, I could find something that's either a celebration or a commemoration day. It's you go through the calendar, you could have something. I make sure that the ones that my school board are also noticing and bringing to light, but I also try and find other smaller ones too, especially smaller ones that I know are representative of some of the students in my class. So having them just be aware of their own inclusion in the world in these commemoration days is also important. A long way of saying, I don't know if happy International Women's Day is the appropriate salutation. So I don't
Oh,
know.
so I appreciate everything you said. And uh, if it's okay with you, I want to lock into the unlearning for
Yep.
a second or two. This week, I spent a lot of time with different students, and this whole unlearning business kind of kept creeping up. I would, I would talk to students, and I would get different responses to the way I was communicating with them, to the point where I finally said, I don't understand what the problem is. I don't understand why, when I talk to you this way, you look at me that way." And they're like, it's almost like they're so used to being spoken to or treated in a particular way that they don't know what to do when they're spoken to or treated in another way. And
Mhm.
I want to be kind of careful here, which is maybe not my style, but I'm not I'm not I don't believe I was communicating with them in a negative way. And I'm not saying that how they're normally communicated to is in a negative way, but I was approaching things my way. And my way is, if I look at you and I say hello or good morning or good afternoon, I expect you to look at me and do the same thing, to acknowledge me somehow, some way, in a way that you're comfortable with. So not robotic style and you must, you must. I was trying not to enforce anything. But when you look at somebody like, hey, what's going on? And they look at you and they say, I didn't do anything. And then it's like, well, I didn't say you did anything. I'm checking in. And they're like, why are you checking in? Well, because you're staring at me and I'm staring at you and we're in the same space. So what's up? Um, So I found this week I was experiencing a lot of that. But the good news is that by the end of the week, I had people actually saying, "Hey, Mr. C, what's going on? What's going on? How are you doing right now?" They were starting to talk to me like I was talking to them. And I was like, "This is cool. This is cool," because when it hits the fan, and it always does, I like to lean on I like to lean on, "Hey, I don't understand what's happening here, why you're behaving this way. We have a relationship where we can talk to each other in a respectful way, in a respectful manner. So let's tone down the attitude and let's go back to the mutual respect so we can try to figure out what's going on here and I can support you the best way that I can without in a way that still fits within the realm of school, right? Because I had to say that a couple times this week. We're at school. So I'm not going to operate. One kid dropped the F bomb outside playing volleyball. Okay. Hey, it happens. They're they're like and I'm rethinking this whole grade 7 and 8s being in an elementary school thing again. I don't think they belong there. They belong there in a nice way, in that it's nice to have them included, but they don't belong there because of the swearing and the attitude and the chemicals running through their body. They don't belong there. And it's not fair for everybody in the building to expect them to operate a certain way when they're kind of pushing boundaries and stuff. There's just a lot going on. So I look over at the student and I'm like, really, really? And did you have to yell it? Like it's one thing it comes out under your breath or whatever, but really, what do you? And then there's the whole. I'm like, what do you want me to do with that? Because they're thinking, you're in big trouble. I'm like, well, they're not in big trouble, but like, what do you want me to do with that? My inclination is for you to look at me and say, I'm sorry. I'm really going to work on that. And I'm like, okay, I like that. Thank you. But it carried on for a little bit where it's like, are you going to tell my mother? And it's funny because the mother works in the system and I know the mother. So I say to the student, I say I laughed, which is good because I need to laugh. I laughed and I said, "If your mother approaches me or communicates to me and says to me, 'Hey, Mr. C, did my daughter drop the F word at recess playing volleyball on this day?' Then I will say, 'Yes, she did.' But aside from that, I'm not planning on calling your mother. I'm planning on this conversation being enough for you to understand that I understand that it came out of your mouth and I see the context. So I'm considering context. I'm considering like it's the first time I ever heard you say that. And we're now having a reasonable conversation about why I don't expect to hear that from you here anymore because of the context we're in. I consider it's over. The child had a hard time with that. So finally, I said after the third or fourth conversation, I don't understand why you keep bringing it up. Like, if tell me, I'm worried, I'm nervous, I think you're going to. Like, what is it about this that you just won't let it go? Do you? And then it came out, I feel guilty.
Mm,
The student said, I feel guilty. I feel bad because I know it's wrong. And I'm like, I understand and I appreciate that. And I'm telling you, you fixed it with me. I don't know how it works with other people.
that's the key.
You fixed it with me. I'm satisfied with your response. If you keep doing it, then let's look at that then. Until then, I'm okay. And then it was necessary for that student to say she feels guilty. Like she knows she did something wrong. How does she get past it? I'm like, get past it because you got a long life to live and there's going to be a lot that you do wrong. Um, and sometimes people aren't going to respond the same way I'm currently responding. And you may do something else that I wouldn't respond so calm about, kind of thing. You get what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Karen says, solid point regarding what fits in the realm of school. I appreciate how you define it through relationships, boundaries, and routines. Powerful for students and for the adults alike. Hashtag respect. Well, I got to tell you, it's, I, I mean, I try to remember that for myself. So if I'm going to do it for myself, I'm going to try to do it for the students. I feel like things have changed in my career, and things have changed. Like the kids just seem loose and out of control, if I can generalize for a moment. And so what do we have left? What we have left is I'm going out of my way to talk to these kids and say hello to all of them all the time with a smile and with a joke, so that when it comes to the point where they're screaming and yelling at someone or putting hands on, then it's like, "Hey, look at me. Remember I'm the guy that's always saying hi to you? Can we refocus for a minute? Can we get away from this situation? Remember, I'm not here to cause you harm. I'm here to help you out as best as I can." And the last thing I'll say, Chris, before I let you jump in, is when I was driving away from school on Friday, this was awesome. This was awesome. I pulled up to a stop sign. I looked to my right, I looked to my left, and on the left, there was a group of students from the school, all intermediate students. Most of them I don't teach. They all waved at me, and I'm not their teacher. So there was something about that moment like, "Hey, it's Mr. C." I'm like, "That's awesome." So instead of looking at me and being like, "Oh, get this old man out of here," they were kind of like, "Hey, have a good one. Hey, we know you. Have a good one." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm out of here." you know, I was probably talking to you at the time while this happened, but that's a good sign for me. So I'm gonna try keep building as much as I can in that way, because it's gonna hit the fan. I've already seen it a few times.
I've met so many kids that are missing or have just pieces of the necessary fluency to kind of work through that moment. And I think their flight mechanism gets triggered really quickly, right? I mean, even let's say, puberty notwithstanding, their capacity to sort of stay in the conversation after I've said to them, now what? After they've done something that, you know, clearly breaks school code, clearly is an ethical breach, clearly might be cruel, clearly might just be a little untethered. And I say, now what? My second thing that I often say is, let's slow this down. Let's just slow this down for a second. We're not going to jump ahead in the process. We are going to go through this step by step, which again, I've met a few students that don't have a tolerance for moving through it slow. I think moving through it slow raises the risk. It's my observation. And that by moving slow, it's like you're going to take more hits. There's a certain, what's that called? Like, I don't even know what it's called anymore, but it's like if they actually move slowly through this moment, then potentially it's going to be more frightening, more painful, more angering, and they just want to avoid the emotionality of that. Whereas I try and build in there that slow just means we can be mindful and we can actually not hurt each other in the process again. We can actually just talk about this in a neutral way. Um, even with that, I've had students say, "Just tell me what the punishment is," and I'm uh, like slowly on ramping to the conversation. They're like, "Just give me the punishment. Give me the punishment so I can go on with my day." So I like where you're going with this. I like that you're revisiting it sort of as a new experience, but making sure that you're again slowing it down and paying attention to it. Um, I often think about what is the family's capacity to have moments like this, because even though it's the symptoms are presenting themselves at school, there's a whole other nurturing side that I just wonder how they're sort of like how they're kind of rolling through it. And if this behavior is generalized, is it just something that happens at school, or are they the kid kind of, saying, swearing a lot or becoming aggressive, or even high success? You can sort of take the positive side too. Is school the only place? Is school the one off, or is home and school life harmonized? I like this though. I find I like what you're pointing out with this.
I so I wanted on Twitter, Dustin, who is sorry, on X, on Twitter X, I follow Dustin, who you and I've talked to you about him. He has a podcast, a father's podcast. I think it's called the Present Fathers Podcast. And this week he posted about him and his group who do the podcast had a person on their podcast. I don't know if this person's a psychologist, or I can't remember what their role is, but this idea of it's bad, it's not good for students to keep them in for recess kind of came up, and
Mhm.
it lit me up a little bit. um, and so I responded to him a bunch of times on my perspective, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the high school perspective of recess, because recess doesn't really exist in high school the way it exists in elementary. So I want to go there in a second. I want to hear your perspective on some of the things I'm going to say. um, Rochelle says that it's key to build the positive relationships with the students before you need to come down with discipline reparations. And sometimes the discipline isn't even what they think it is. The discipline is not what they think it is. Especially in my case, the discipline is um, you are being, I don't know why you are not responding to me in a pro-social manner. That's the discipline. The discipline is not, you must come see me at recess for 15 minutes and write this, or we talk about, it's like, I'm communicating with you and you're not communicating back. This is not a positive thing, and I want to know why it's happening this way, whatever the situation is. So let's kind of work it through a little bit. So this week I'm working, this kid walks past the room, looks in, makes a face. I catch this kid by the eye, and I'm like, "Hey, come here." And the kid doesn't come. So I say to one of the students in the room, "Go, can you go get that kid?" "Yeah." So he leaves, he comes back with the kid. I'm like, "Hey, how are you?" He goes, "Good." I said, "Did you need me?" Because of the way you were kind of flying by looking at me. I know he didn't need me. I know he was being silly, but instead of just hammering him with, "Why are you disturbing the room?" It's, "Did you need something? Because I caught your eye." "No." And I say, "What grade are you in?" And the student says, "Grade 4." And I'm like, "No, you're not." And everybody's frozen. And I'm like, "You're not in grade 4 because this is the intermediate hallway." And and then I look at the students in the room and I'm like, "Pay attention to what I'm about to do here." I look back at the kid and I say to the kid, "You're wearing a graduation sweater. And if you turn around, I'm going to see your last name on the back. So who are you and what grade are you in?" Dumbfounded. Everybody in the room's dumbfounded. I'm like, it doesn't take a genius to look at the clues and the cues, right? So frozen. So I say, "Listen, I'm gonna let you get back because your teacher's probably like, 'Where's my kid?' Right? Kid's been gone forever. When you see me outside on yard duty, come over and say hello. Let's chat. I'll figure out who you are somehow, some way. Don't make me have to go asking questions. Just come chat with me. You'll see me outside." The kid leaves. Everybody in the room's like, "That's so and so." I'm like, "Thanks. You guys and gals just leave it alone. This is between him and I." And this was happening hourly. Kids walking past, looking in, doing their thing. They're like, I'm inviting them in. "Come on in. Who are you? Who are you? Who's your teacher? Where are you going?" Because I'm like, I got nothing left in me. So I got nothing to lose, right? If if I've got nothing to lose, I got to find something to gain. I got to find something to build. So why not just be the nicest I can be to these people unless something goes wrong, right? So anyway, I see this kid outside. He does come over to me. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, it makes no sense to me that I would say hello to you, invite you in, ask you for your name, and you looking at me like you're in the biggest trouble in your life. And I had done some recon. I talked to this kid's teacher, and she was surprised. She's like, "This kid, really? He did that?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she was like, "No, he's a really good kid. He's an A student." Like, she's listing off all these positives about this student. And I respond with, no, I'm not being negative. I'm just telling you that in that situation, he struck out. Like he didn't know what to do and he was all quiet and he wasn't even in trouble. And people aren't letting me even get to the point of telling them you're not in trouble. This is how humans communicate. So it's kind of weird though, because I'm not operating in the same way that they're used to in the context of school. So I'm trying to say to them, why are you operating this way? But I'm the weirdo. Because I guess people don't walk in and just like call you into their room and ask how you're doing and want to know your name. I'm like, no, the more names I know, the better it is for me to have those conversations, in my opinion. And I'm coming in from a different lens, right? I'm coming in from a different lens, different perspective. And like I got nothing. So I gotta build something. Recess. Bro, it's all I've always been of the opinion I don't want to keep kids in for recess. I know that they need their time to socialize, breathe in the fresh air, run around, do their thing. I get all that. I also need to do my thing. I need to use the bathroom. I need to make sure I'm ready for after recess. I need to friggin' just be away from everybody and just be me, right?
We don't take away math if you swear in class.
Right. We don't. Um so this is the thing on X was um you shouldn't take recess away. And I'm like, well, we you in my opinion, it's important to figure out what's going on. If there's a student who's made a mess, they're responsible for cleaning up that mess. When is it going to get cleaned up? How's it going to be dealt with? So I've said to a few students recently that there's been an issue, and I've said like, well, listen, everything's heated right now. You're trying to get me heated and I'm not falling for it. So I'm going to send you away because I'm not interested in. I said to them, a power struggle with me is going to mean you lose every time. So I said this a couple times. You can test me or you can trust me. Which T do you want to go with? I'm going to give you time to think about that. So you're going to go back, and when you're calmer, I need you to find a time to approach me to fix this because I don't want to deal with this in the 15 minutes that I might have to go use the bathroom, get a drink, check my phone. Like totally 100% selfish, but I'm like, it's up to you. So kid goes, I think when we were transitioning from one subject to another, the kid came over and said, "Can we talk now?" I said, "Yes, absolutely." Kid explained himself. I told the kid, like, I agree with that. I disagree with that. You're going to need to fix this with that person now. Yada, yada, yada. Kid got his recess. But I'm like, it's got to be dealt with because I think part of the problem I've seen in education over the last 20 years is when people don't deal with those problems, they create more problems. So I don't see myself as a teacher that nitpicks for everything, but I will stop the class and I will say what just happened there is it's non-negotiable when I'm your teacher. It's not happening. So like, are we going to fight over it? Because again, you're going to lose. I it's me like, that's just me as a teacher and as a human. There are very few non-negotiables and I will die on those hills and I will go into that war every time. It's not negotiable. It's not going to happen. Um so some will always test and push and they lose. And then even in that I will joke about that. I will say, like, hey, you're not always going to be on the end of a losing battle. I'm on many ends of losing battles. Um how do we move forward? So even in the struggle, even in the disrespect, or what is perceived as disrespect, I just say, you're really upset. I don't want to be as upset as you, so you're going to go away now. You tell me where you need to go. You tell me what you need to do. Okay? Take some control of your situation. I'll give that to you. I'll let you have that. And we need to fix this. Now, if you don't fix it and recess is the time, then recess is the time. We all lose our recess. Do I want to do that? No. But I'm not leaving situations just, oh, you did this? No problem. Go ahead and do it again 50 times until then the principal's involved, your parents are involved, and everybody's looking at the teacher like, did you try to do anything? Like, did you talk to this kid? I'm not interested in any of that. So, um, what happens in high school? And I don't know how well you can speak to it, but what happens in high school when there's a situation? How is it dealt with? Because there's no recess. Like you could say to a kid, "Come back at lunch and talk to me," but they go and they may not come back.
Mhm. Yeah. So, for me, I try and deal with it right there. I have to do a quick assessment of what's my relationship with this kid because it might not be my own kid in my class because I am that teacher. Like I'm that human. I'm curious about everybody in the school. So no one's out of my scope. If I'm walking down the hallway and there's something, I want to connect with someone, I'll do my best to kind of do that respectfully and with dignity, and slowly as well. Um, so I guess there's a lot of different kind of versions. There's the tried and true, come and see me on your lunch. That can kind of work as long as you have the same lunch as the kid, because in high school, like not all kids in my high school, you could have lunch on period 2, 3, or 4. We're a 5-period school. As it happens, I have my lunch on 3. I have my prep on 2. So if I can, if I can, for me, I tend to, if the kid's not in my class, like not in my space, I'll go to them. I'll make the time to go to them and go find them because they might be in another class. I'll contact the other teacher. I'll say, hey, can I pull them for 5 minutes for a conversation that we didn't get to finish? Um, but I just do the slow work. That's me. Other people, they put it on the lunch. In our school, kids get detention if it comes through admin. Kids could get detention on their lunch. So I think what recess represents, I think what recess represents in elementary is, I think it's kind of structurally and probably even developmentally different than what the nearest equivalent in high school would be your spare or lunchtime, right? Um, I think that recess in elementary is can be seen as a tool for wellness, like it's kind of connected with wellness, which is surprising that then it could be taken away, in some way, like having to sort of stay in on your recess. In high school, we don't really have that sense of lunch specifically a wellness building opportunity. So to give a kid, a period detention, and sometimes they don't you like they wouldn't have lunch. So they could have to have given up their lunch. And if they forget their lunch, it's like, well, that's on you, young adult. You didn't bring any food. And no, you can't go across to the plaza because now after your lunchtime detention, you have to go to period 4, whatever it is, the next period. Don't skip, otherwise you're going to get another detention, right? It just the pipeline continues. Um, for me, I again the two tactics for me that I typically use before I'll ever expect a kid to come to me is I catch them in the moment, right there, right then. Do my best. If I need follow up, I'll go to them. I'll go find out. I have the information system. I can find any kid that I want any time of day. I can call up their teacher. I can get their parents' information. I can reach out to. I'm also that teacher as well that I've called kids' parents who aren't in my classes. And, hi, my name's Clough. I had an interaction with your child today. Let me just brief you on what it is. You may have already gotten a text for them about some guy, old guy with a beard and a pink hoodie, talked to me in the hallway. I was only doing this. I was only doing this. He was such, and like, that's all possible. I said, maybe it's a positive interaction that this dude, this cool guy had a conversation with me in the hallway. Who knows? But I'll also contact parents of kids that aren't mine. So, mhm.
Okay, I like that because it sounds to me like there is no because there is no recess option. It is just black and white. Like, hey, I just
Mhm.
saw this. Come here. We were talking about this. I like that. Um, and I wonder if that's an approach that I should take as recess. Like, don't even consider that recess is there. Just deal with it. The I guess what gets in the way a little bit is that, well, the same thing in high school. You're teaching something. You're teaching content, and your content's being something's being interrupted while you deal with the situation. I guess for me what sucks is being with the same kids all day long every day. Like, it would be easier to say, well, I'm only with this class for 80 minutes, so you know I just got to put up with Jimmy. I even hate to say it that way. I got to put up with Jimmy for 80 minutes every day, but then Jimmy's gone and I can like move on to the next group. In the elementary, for me, it's because you're with them all day. It's like it becomes family. That's I've always said that to my classes. I've always said we're a family, and in families you have good times, you have bad times, you have fun times, it's emotional, it's people feel hurt, it's like a family. And so that's going to happen here too. It's going to happen here too, and we're going to get on each other's nerves. And I like, for me, it's, I guess, at the end of the day, how do we leave the day, how do we come back to it the next day? Because I got to tell you, dude, when you get to know certain people and you see their patterns, right? You see their patterns and you see things that maybe rub you the wrong way, and it's like, okay, well, what do I do with that? What do I do with that? Um, what do I do with that? It reminds me of over the years over the years I can remember some of these students vividly, where I felt like after being with a kid for a full year, I never established a relationship. And how weird does that sound? It's like the year comes to an end. I'm like, I never, that kid just, we didn't click. It just didn't happen. And it's weird being with the same people every day for 10 months and not really building anything. But it's happened to me. It's happened where the year ends and I'm like, wow, 10 months and that kid and I just never clicked.
Well, I don't think that's true at all. I don't think that's true. I don't even think it's possible. I think I think how you're assessing it is from a single point of view. So whatever your sort of perspective is, the kids are not under any obligation to reveal to you how important you are to them. They're just not, right? That's not how I think. That's not how. In so much as it can be really frustrating, as in you don't feel like you're receiving anything. Um, I don't. I reserve the sort of like the judgment. I really pull back on the judgment that uh, that this relationship with this kid should be as good or as flourishing as others in the class. Like I really sort of kind of pulled a 10,000 feet on that. There's students that I've felt like I've gone deep, and then, the next school year, they haven't ever talked to me again. They completely avoid me. Sorry, again, a judgment. I just never see them. I see them in the hall. They don't even make eye contact. They just move on. Similar kids 2 years later, then come back. So it's a funny little forced perspective that because you're at the center of their class, that you're at the center of their world. And I think that in so much as it is family, it's also very parental kind of acknowledgement. I've gone through this with my own kids where all of a sudden, you are the other. You feel like, like the kids are the center of your world, but your kids have a universe unto themselves. And when that starts to kind of creep into your family unit, you start to realize, oh shit, yeah, my kids they're growing up and out, like their orbits, the Venn is sort of widening out on that end, right? Our dinner table is that center kind of spot, but then analyze your own and you realize how far out yours goes as well, and the things that they don't know about you. So yeah, I don't give a lot of mental airtime to saying that the relationship could any more or less than it was, because just daily trying to make it work kind of works for me. There are students that if I just use the same tactic with every kid, the same relational building with every kid, it's going to sometimes work and sometimes not. If I modulate that, it's going to sometimes work and it's sometimes not. Like there's no assurance that all the professional reflection that I do are conversations with you about parenting and, becoming a better man, human, husband, that any of that's going to work. There just isn't that there's no calculus for that. So I like that you're acknowledging it only only in so much as you acknowledge that building relationships is difficult, maintaining relationships is even more difficult, and that there's a lot of confusion, and there should be confusion as we get to know each other because all of us are complex. So, and I don't think that makes any difference at elementary or secondary. What I do find in secondary is that um, what I do find in secondary, time and time again, is that parents are slightly surprised that I know their child so well. They're slightly surprised. And they almost sometimes like will say, sometimes it gets kind of silly a little bit. The parents will say, well, you know that, and they'll put some sort of like idea bomb in the conversation. I'm like, yeah, yeah, they told me. And the parents are like, really? I'm like, yeah, yeah. We talked about it at lunch yesterday. The whole lunch? Yep, yep. And they're gonna come back tomorrow and talk to me about it again. Really? So yeah, it's a funny thing. I've had that moment play out quite a bit. The kids just aren't sharing like they are. They're not sharing at home like they're sharing at school. Hell, I've experienced that too with my own children, though. They come home for dinner and they say, Mr. Jones says, and they lay out what Mr. Jones says. I'm like, really? I've been saying that forever. Mr. Jones becomes gospel. So,
I love that. Thanks for your perspective on that.
mhm.
And maybe I feel a little haunted that I didn't feel like I made a connection with a kid. 10 months is a long time, bro, to feel weird around another human. I'm just saying,
No, no,
for me it is.
no, dude, live in Toronto and take the TTC to work every day. You're I was surrounded by individuals on the streetcar that I'm like, "Ooh, oh, like you're people watching, you're surrounded by humans that you're surrounded by many humans that you have no clue how to connect with."
Okay, but when you're in the same room and you're
Mhm,
responsible for their care,
mhm.
I don't know. I guess it for me it's a little bit more intimate than riding the TTC every day for 10 months. And Jimmy might be across from me, but I have no forced connection to Jimmy on the TTC. I don't have
I
to sign
think
his report card, and I don't have to call his parents if there's an issue or if I need something from them.
I think this is why I like the language. I like that you said care because, you didn't say parent, you haven't said family, but you haven't said the word parent. I would find it far more stressful in that situation 10 months around if I were their parent. But because I'm their caregiver, what that means is I feel that it frees me up from some of that impulse that the relationship should be something more. It puts the onus on me just to provide the elements of care. And I think I've learned this from working with EAs and individuals that are like social workers and therapists, where they refer to the individual that is in their care as a client. And it's not a dehumanizing term, it's just a technical term. And I think it allows professional distance. I can care for you, I can care about you, and we can choose to become family. But I like that idea of being a caregiver in the classroom. Now I know our fiduciary, sort of like the laws say that we are the parent, when the parents aren't there. But it really isn't because I mean it's the language of liability and responsibility, but not actually a family. So they're using a family term, but they're not family. Like we don't have that much power. We're just responsible for do no harm and eliminate harm, right? So I like the idea of caregiver. And if you are a caregiver, there is no obligation on the individual to open up to you. There should be an obligation for them to sort of accept the care. That would be tricky. If they didn't accept the care and they're pushing back on the care, that would be weird. And the care can be something as simple as what you're pointing out. Hello, how are you this morning? It's good to see you. Welcome to the classroom. Basic criteria of care, right? And maybe expect a response back. That's fair. But, I've been weird. I've been weird around students for 2 years, and it never gets there. And I've worked closely with them a couple days a week. So again, your feels, my feels. I just think I like the language of caregiver. I like the language of client. It gives me a space where I feel dignified in the work that I do, and that I'm still following the expectations of school, the parents. I've told parents as a caregiver for your child, and I've never had a parent push back and like caregiver. That's weird. It's a term that sort of I think it's a well worn term that speaks to a acceptable agenda of looking after their child. Everything else becomes kind of loaded, so it's a nice neutral ground.
As I hear you talk about that, I'm not right now. I'm not comfortable. I would not be comfortable saying to a parent at this moment that I'm a caregiver for their child.
Mm,
Um, and that's good for me. I'll be thinking about that for this day to try to figure out what's going on there, and what it is inside of me that's what that doesn't fit well.
mhm.
First and foremost, I would say, well, I'm your child's teacher, and with that comes care. Like I do care if they're upset. I
I
want to.
disagree.
Pardon?
I disagree.
You disagree with what?
I disagree that that comes together. I think it
Oh,
becomes
I see what you're saying.
yeah, I think it's becomes cloudy if we put that in there. And this is sometimes where I get a little weird around other teachers. Teacher does not convey care.
For me, I guess the way I define it, it does.
Mhm. I
And
think you benefit from Catholic tenets though. And I think that we've talked about this, that one of the things I like about, you know, Catholic expectations is that care and commitment and connection is woven through the curriculum expectations. Like your Catholic belief is woven through it. That's fantastic. Us and sort of like, outside, um, in the public world, it has to be an added layer. Teacher in my world is a technical term, very technical.
that's very interesting.
Mhm.
That's very interesting. Um, it reminds me of when I was in teachers college and I did a placement in the public system, and I really struggled to not lean on to not publicly lean on my faith. It was very different.
You totally
Um,
should. It's a superpower, man.
it was weird, and I know sometimes, like, in the Catholic system, sometimes we take things for granted, like uh, prayer and the tenets of our faith and the way we integrate it in. And when I was newer, it was so cliche. But now that I've been doing it for a long time, the way I operate and the way I integrate my faith or my understanding of my faith into um, the daily work I do, it's
Mhm.
like for me, it's like an art form. So if I could kind of flush this out a little bit more, when I started when I started my career and I knew I was going to have interviews for job, I would always buff up the question about faith. Now, now it's almost like if I'm in an interview, I'm like it's not just a question anymore. Like it's not a question. It's and I want to talk about it. Whereas before it's like, oh shoot, that question's gonna come up. I better know what to say. Now it's like, I don't need to know what to say. I live this every friggin' day. So you can ask me a question about my faith and I'm gonna answer it. And if you don't like my answer, well, that's too bad for you. Because I know how I flex. I know how I lean on my faith. Um, I know how I build relationship. It all comes together. So if you're going to ask me, how do you integrate your faith into science? No, I integrate my faith all day long. And it's how I build relationship, and it's how I look at my students, and it's how I provide them with what they need. And it's how I consider who they are as humans, sons and daughters of God and how they need to be treated. So if you're looking for an answer in science for me to give you like a technical whatever, I'm not giving it to you. Sorry. I'm going to give you like I'm going to answer that question the same way every time, no matter if it's phys ed, science. It's who I am. I'm just built to operate a certain way. I've been doing it for long enough now that the way I do it is care and compassion, and taking the time to get to know people and seeing what they need and how to get there, and how to get there, I guess, in the most positive way, in terms of like positive, right, instead of negative, 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 because we could hammer kids over the head with the faith in a negative way all the time. I'm not interested in doing that. You show me who you are, I'll show you who I am, and I'll try to give you what you need to get to where you need to be. And so if I could like zoom out for a minute, all this talk about people's sexuality and how they identify, like when I'm in the building at school and you come to me and you tell me you're struggling with your identity or your sexuality, I will listen to you and I will do everything I can to ensure that at that moment in time, I'm not causing you any harm, regardless of what my like perspective is. It's the context of the school again. My job is to take care of you, to make sure you're okay, not to cause you harm. I take that very seriously, and it upsets me to hear other people talk about their perspective. If it was your kid in front of me and your kid tells me something that is very difficult to deal with in life, you want me to hammer them over the head with how wrong they are about how they're living their life? Or do you want me to give them a place to talk, give them a place to maybe find some peace? And of course, my job is to communicate with other people because it's not my wheelhouse to take care of this. My wheelhouse is how do I build relationship? How do I help? What can I do to help that build that kid up so that when they leave me, they are responsible people in this world? How do I do that? And if I'm looking at a kid and saying, "You're wrong about how you want to live your life," I don't believe I'm building anybody. Unless they're harming someone or something, then it's like you can't do that. You can't walk around the world harming people. That's not how we've decided to live as a society. But yeah, man, uh, I appreciate what you're saying about the faith part. For me, it's just what can I do to build you up today instead of break you down? And if you need to be broken down, then it's not me making an executive decision. It's whatever you're doing is so bad or so heinous or so wrecking things for everybody that it needs to be dealt with. And it's not just me alone who gets to deal with that. I would like to think that for the positive things, it can just be me alone. Build them up, let them go. But if it's so bad and so negative, then other people need to be involved because it's going to affect more than just me. I don't know. It's hard to explain. In practice, I can do it. If you drop me in there and you're like, okay, can you navigate this? I'm going to do the best I can, but it's hard to talk about it. Rochelle says her teaching partner and herself tell their students that they are their school moms, but they do have younger students, primary, right? Yeah, I try not to call myself a school dad. Uh, I try not to do that. I just say to them, I'm here to take care of you. Your parents aren't around. So I act like a parent, but I'm not your parent. But I can give you hints and tips on how to treat your parents so that they treat you well too. I love doing it like that. I'm like, I'm not your dad, but I tell you, if your dad heard this right now, he would not be happy. So how can we make it so that your dad would be happy?
Yeah, I like to, because I think that in many ways, the teacher is the first legitimate authority away from parents, right? It's one of the firsts. There might be second layers of your family, but a legit outside power holder that has some measure of control over, another little human. Teachers are a big part of that. So I often I don't I've heard other teachers, even in secondary, say stuff like that, that they actually use the term, that they're the mom or the dad. Um, I've had students call me dad. They walk in and they're like, "Yo, dad," and then the whole class just stops. I'm like, "Yeah, my name's Clough." And they're like, "Right, right," and we just kind of move on. So it happens in secondary. But I've also had other colleagues call me their work husband, and I'm quick to say, "I am not your husband. I'm not your husband. I don't accept that. I don't. I do not.
I,
I do not." And I think this is where the family terminology starts to get a little bit murky, right? Because it's a fairly it's in many ways it's a monolith of a belief system that does include someone that could be very specifically called your mom or your dad, right? We don't often call our parents caregivers, um, as in, relating to us, like as we look up to our parents. So I think that's also why I'm cautious about using that term. I get why people would, because it's a fast track. It can be a fast track to a relationship. It can be a fast track to rules of engagement, and it can also be a fast track to probably like progressive discipline, right? Like you can shut stuff down pretty quickly if you can actually address a kid in a way that one of their parents do, as an example, or use your parent voice, and they're like, "Oh, this means serious." I take the responsibility a little bit differently, though, is that I am one of a few that I hope of people that are not directly a part of their family that will support them away from their family. So I am like the hockey coach. I am like the art teacher that they may have. I am like that friend of the family that sometimes watches their dog. I am that trusted other that is not family. They're welcome to, I guess, call me that. I am not family, but I'm also trustworthy. I'm also reliable. I'm also responsible. I also have new experiences that are outside your family, but may help you in your family. So I think that's a big part of why I like the caregiver, because I find it a parallel path, but just as powerful. Just as powerful.
I have been called mom by my primary students, which I always,
Mom.
yeah, hey mom. And I look over, I'm like, I'm not your mom. And I always get that's when I always say to the kid, well, I'm glad that you feel comfortable enough to call me mom. That's a good sign. Let's get back to our math work or whatever it is. But
Mhm.
yeah, I've been called mom, not even dad, mom. I'm like, oh, I'll take that
Good.
compliment. Um, Rochelle says our faith is so integrated into our day that it's hard to separate it out to explain. Yeah, it's not just I don't just flex my Christian faith during science
The
class. I
best way
do it all the time.
the best way I've heard it is live your faith. Live your faith. For better for worse, live your faith. And it that there is no unexpected there that sort of as a teacher, we like to explain a lot of things, podcast notwithstanding. So, but if you're living your faith, I think outside of that, the one that I might say is just live the questions, live the questions. So, yeah, I think if you're actively doing that and sharing the experiences and the outcomes of living your faith, then you're doing well. And sometimes those are observable moments. The challenge of living a faith-filled life, I'm sure, is there's many challenging moments, very challenging human moments, that if you could find a way to do it in public to whatever comfort level you have, you don't always have to explain what's going on. You can give a very small taste of it, and just frame it as far as like, this is the challenge of being human, and this is the challenge of being human, with Catholic belief.
And on that note, did you draw anything today?
Yeah, I did.
Can we take a look before we shut it down?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it's a shirt pocket.
It's a pocket.
I like that.
In the pocket.
In the pocket. Well,
In the
thanks for your time today. I appreciate it. I'm glad we could make this happen today, and
hmm
um, hopefully next week we can return to our regularly scheduled time. We'll see.
Yeah,
We'll
for
see what's
sure.
going on.
Absolutely.
Thanks to all our listeners today and to the participation. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
Enjoy, if you're a teacher, enjoy your March break. You're welcome, Gary. Thanks for hanging out
You're
with us
welcome,
today.
Gary. Thanks for coming back in. Thanks for being vigilant. The notification pops up. Clef and Chids are there.
Right. I
Grab a
appreciate that.
coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was season 7, episode 20, number 285. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Peace.
Rochelle. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Karen. Peace.